I'm Rebecca and welcome to my sewing room. Today I wanted to take a look at part of my Extant garment collection, my antique collection. I started this collection about 2013, so I guess about might have been 2014, 6 or 7 years ago, with a particular find that I came across in an antique store up in Linwood, and it was a dress that was mislabeled. It was labeled 1900s dress, and naturally, or luckily, I happened to find it in a booth that was actually 40% off at the time. And so for $35, I walked out of this antique store with a hand-sewn cotton dress from the 1860s. Now, obviously, I love antique clothing for what they can tell us actually physically about how a dress is put together, or how a bodice or a garment or etc. is made. But I also think that they're absolutely fascinating for thinking about the women that wore these garments in the past. For those of you who don't know, I live in the Seattle area. And as I mentioned, I picked this dress up in Linwood, which is just north of Seattle. And so this dress, being an 1860s dress, when you think about what this area was like at that time, if this dress happened to be here then, it was wild. There wasn't much here. It was a lot of nature, a lot of pioneers coming and settling, and it's kind of adventurous, especially for women. So when I think about the story that the original wearer must have had, it fascinates me. I wanted to share with you my antique collection, and although I'll do that probably over a series of videos because I do have a fairly extensive collection at this point, I thought what better way to start than with the dress that started it all, my hand-sewn 1860s dress. So hope you enjoy. You'll have to ignore the very messy sewing room in the background of this video, but let's take a closer look at the bottom of this dress. It has 2 layers of ruffles, and the tops of the ruffles have been ruched and are tacked in place. The bottoms of the ruffles are all bound in self-bias. The bottom ruffle is the same as the top ruffle. And you can see that it's kind of been tucked under where it's been ruched. There's that bias. And underneath the ruffles, the skirt has been treated with that sort of knit braid. I don't know exactly what that's called, but you see it a lot on antique garments. And there's a facing of, I think, about 5 inches depth, whose top has just been scalloped and is tacked in place with little stitches. Taking a look at the bodice here, one of the interesting things is all of the tiny piping that is all over this bodice. It is so tiny and wonderful. Notice the shoulder seam pattern does not match. That's okay. More of that tiny piping on the sleeve, and a ruched layer that's kind of similar to what they've done on the skirt, minus the ruffle. Sleeve is cut on the bias, and we have 2 layers of not quite ruched but not quite pleated trim. That trim is actually tacked in place at each one of those pleats. Same with the bottom, it has been tacked in place as well, and then the bottom half of that is ruched. That is just turned under and stitched in place for the hem. I love how it's been pieced here. If you take a close look, look at that pattern matching on the inside of the arm, and the little bit of piecing, they did such a good job. You can tell it's not in the best state, but not bad for its age. Look at this interesting lining coming out from beyond the buttons. The buttons have been replaced. I wasn't the one who replaced them. They were replaced at some point with plastic buttons. But I love how the lining sticks out past the bodice because they just needed that little bit of extra. This is the skirt, how it closes. It's got this lapped section where the skirt sticks out underneath the bodice of the other side, and then there's an extra lap of fabric, just flat, no pleats or anything. and that skirt connected at some point with a hook and an eye. The eye is the only thing remaining now. That is just a selvage edge. Look at that on the exterior of the garment. Selvage edge that hasn't been treated, hasn't been turned in. It's wonderful. And it's a very deep opening, though I believe there's about 4 inches of stitching right here that has come out over time, because you can see the remnants of little stitches. But otherwise, that opening is probably at least 15 plus inches. Taking a look at the back here, I love how it has been stitched here to have 2 pieces, and it's actually top stitched. I believe this is just a running stitch, so it could be a back stitch. Tiny, tiny stitches with the pattern pretty darn close to matched. It's impressive. I've got tiny, tiny cartridge pleats here. You can see the scale with my fingers. Those are tiny pleats, and they're set into piping, naturally. There's more of that little stitching on those back side pieces. Taking a look at the skirt here, it's pretty full, and actually this bodice is not the smallest, or this dress in general is not the smallest. It is in modern standards, but I think the waist is actually probably, I haven't measured it in a while, but I think it's pretty close to 24 inches, 26 inches. Look at that nice piecing there again on the other sleeve. They did a fantastic job with the piecing on both sleeves. And it's wonderful the way the sleeve seam makes that nice chevron in the back. This dress is actually fairly long as well. I don't know if it was made to go over a hoop or not. You can see more piecing here. This is under the arm. We're taking a look at it. I've taken it off the form. They really did a great job matching the color stripe where it needs to everywhere that they've pieced. Here's a closer look at those stitches that make up the side backs. And let's take a look inside this lovely bodice. It's all lined in a light brown cotton. You can kind of see that closure there where it laps over. And it'll go to right there where that where the hook should be. It's a very wide seam allowance actually on the sides. It looks like it may have been taken in at some point, just a little bit, probably a ½ inch on each side. And the back, if you notice, is actually all one piece. They didn't need those side back pieces. That's decorative, people. This is a pretty wide seam allowance now. Notice over 3/4 of an inch. The sleeve has a little, or the underarm has a little discoloration. And actually, if we look inside the underarm, there is a facing around the top of the sleeve. I'm not exactly sure what that would have been for. Maybe just to kind of protect it. It's still of the same cotton as the inside, but it's faded. We've got interesting stitches here on the shoulder as well. I don't know that those stitches have any function, but they're nice and wide. You can see a better view of the underarm there. Nice little darts. And here we have wonderful stitches that attach the lining to the outer, and you can see again where the lining sticks out past the outer. I think that's such an interesting detail. The whole skirt has been mounted on this waistband inside the bodice. That's what it's been cartridge pleated to. And you can see the top, kind of like in 18th century skirts, has actually just been folded over as it's been cartridge pleated. And that waistband is just attached at the bottom. It's made up actually of, I believe, 3 pieces, the waistband. And the fabric here in the buttonholes has just been lapped over from the front, I guess just as much as they had, and then was incorporated into the buttonholes that way. You can see this side also has that really large seam allowance. Look, piecing even in the lining. Tiny little stitches attaching it to the waistband. And that's a view of my 1860s dress. Thank you so much for joining me here today and exploring this wonderful piece of history with me. I will be doing more of these videos, and I've also had a request for videos going deeper into my process of how I recreate a dress, in particular the 1874 dress that I'm currently working on. So that will be coming soon, but since I haven't worked out all of the kinks yet, I didn't want to put it on YouTube quite yet. I hope you enjoyed this little piece of history with me. And if you did, and if you'd like to see more videos like it or other sewing content or history content videos, please be sure to click subscribe. If you liked this video, please click the little thumbs up icon, and I will see you really soon. Happy sewing!